All right, today we're going to dive into a really fascinating and honestly pretty radical philosophy. It takes a piece of common wisdom, something you might have heard before, and just flips it completely on its head. I mean, it's a question as old as time, right? Is being beautiful a blessing, or is it actually a curse? We usually think of beauty as, a golden ticket to a better life. But what if it comes with a hidden cost? What if there's a famous proverb out there that's been trying to warn us about something we've totally misunderstood? So, our starting point is this Korean proverb, miin bakbok. Now, it basically translates to something like, beautiful people have thin fortunes. The idea is that incredible beauty often leads to a life filled with misfortune. And, this is a pretty common piece of folk wisdom in some places. But here's the twist. The philosophy we're digging into today says this has absolutely nothing to do with destiny. Okay, so to get our heads around this reinterpretation, we first have to look at the whole purpose of beauty through a totally different lens. See, this philosophy argues that a beautiful person's life isn't really their own to live. It's not about them. It has a public role, not a private one. And it's put, well, pretty bluntly, the idea is that a truly beautiful person isn't meant for a simple private life, just being someone's husband or someone's parent. Their role is supposed to be bigger than just their own family. So that begs the question, right? If their beauty isn't for them, then who is it for? Well, according to this way of thinking, their whole purpose is to serve the collective. They're supposed to be the flower of all people, a symbol for everyone to look up to. They're meant to become a kind of mother of the nation, using their influence to love, protect, and guide everyone. So at the end of the day, their beauty isn't just for looks. It's a tool for doing these grand, noble deeds for all of humanity. So you might be asking, where does this huge responsibility even come from? Well, this philosophy suggests that incredible beauty isn't just some random roll of the genetic dice. It's actually seen as the physical manifestation of the collective energy of lots of people all bundled up into one person. And because that gift comes from the people, it has to be used for the people. It's a debt that has to be repaid. Okay, so if a beautiful person has this, grand, noble purpose, that brings us right back to the original proverb, doesn't it? If their life is supposed to be so great, why on earth is there a warning about misfortune? Yeah, this is the big puzzle here. If their destiny is to be a leader, a light for the whole nation, where does this curse even come from? Well, according to this philosophy, the answer is surprisingly simple. It turns out misfortune isn't fate. It's not something that's just bound to happen because you're beautiful. No, it's the direct result of a choice. It's what happens when someone rejects their public duty to chase a private, self-centered life instead. It all comes down to the choices they make. So you can see the two paths laid out pretty clearly here. The path to misfortune, that's all about self-interest. Using your influence to chase fancy cars, luxury goods, and your own personal comfort. But the path to fulfillment, that means choosing to do those noble deeds, to serve the people, and to really embrace that big public role. The so-called curse only gets triggered when you pick path A over path B. All right, so if this special path exists for the beautiful and the elite in society, it kind of makes sense that they'd need a special kind of preparation, right? Your standard conventional education just isn't going to cut it. This philosophy argues that to become a truly wise leader, what it calls an operator of society, this group needs a completely different kind of education. We're not talking about becoming a specialist in one narrow field. And just look at the contrast here. A conventional education, the kind most of us get, focuses on technical details, memorization, all to create specialists, right? Like doctors or engineers. But this elite education is all about grasping the core principles, the big picture. The goal isn't to make another specialist, but to shape a wise operator who can steer the whole system. So, how does this actually work in the real world? Well, it's all about leverage. You've got your specialists who do all the nitty-gritty, deep dive research. Then, their job is to boil all of that complexity down into simplified reports and summaries. The leader's job isn't to do that research all over again. Nope. Their job is to absorb the core wisdom from those summaries and use it to make the big, high-level decisions. Here's a great way to think about it. A leader doesn't need to know how many legs a bug has. They don't need to be the bug expert. What they do need is to understand the report from the bug expert and what it all means. Their time is just too valuable to get bogged down in those tiny details. Their focus has to be on the big picture application.
Okay, so we've talked about the individual, their purpose, and how they should be educated. Now let's zoom out one last time and see how all of these ideas plug into a much bigger vision, a vision for how society itself should be structured.
At the very heart of this vision for society is a concept called 계급 체계. Basically, it translates to a class system or a social hierarchy. The core idea is that society just works better when everyone understands that there are different levels of work and that different people are naturally suited for different kinds of responsibility. Now, in this framework, certain great families, think leaders of huge corporations, for example, are seen as getting their power from, well, from heaven or a higher source. But, and this is a really critical point, their wealth and power aren't actually theirs. It's seen as the collective energy of the people just entrusted to them, and their job is to manage it wisely for the good of everybody. It's also believed that the best people are meant to show up last, to lead the whole system that everyone else has already built from the ground up. So, in this view, accepting this so-called natural order is the absolute key to a stable and prosperous nation. Fighting against the structure the thinking goes is just asking for chaos and decline. And all of this leaves us with a pretty powerful question to chew on. Is this whole worldview a blueprint for a perfectly harmonious society where everyone plays the part they were born for? Or is it just a very elaborate justification for a rigid, unchangeable class system? That's a big one, and ultimately, it's for you to decide. Thanks for joining me on this one.